afternoon. Welcome to Work Liberated. And today I have my dear friend and guest, Serena Fennell, and she is the author of a book called
A Journey of Wholeness.
A Journey of Wholeness. And what is a journey of wholeness?
A journey of wholeness is when you realize that you're wanting to get outside of yourself. And that sounds really strange. What does that mean, get outside of yourself? That you're not actually connected to being whole. That you see your wellness as, once I get this, I'll be whole. Once I get that, I'll be whole. And you never actually get present to right now being whole. Yeah.
Good. Okay. And so in the spirit of the world of work, people are working. We know there's many people who are stressed out beyond anything they've ever experienced at work. There's something called the mass reevaluation or the mass resignation. How do people use a journey of wholeness to have a better relationship with themselves and others at work?
So the people that experience their wholeness and are oriented towards their wholeness, those are the people that seem to have that charisma. When you are around somebody and you just feel good and you want to be around them, a lot of times that is a person who has taken the journey. They might not have the easiest life, but they've learned from their life and they've taken that information and gathered it and are well with all of it. They're no longer these separate parts of themselves that are trying to get something. They're experiencing their wholeness. And they have stepped away from that thing that I was talking about earlier that is trying to get outside, and they know they can find the solutions.
So give me an example. So yesterday we did a retreat with a lovely client. They're an architecture firm in San Jose, and they're having a lot of trouble communicating, very stressed with deadlines, lots of mistakes, problems during the transition, and each person in that group told us that they go home exhausted at the end of the day just from working with all these other people who, by the way, they really like.
Yeah.
So why does that happen?
Yeah, so with that, there's multiple questions within that.
Yeah.
So the first one is you're with a great group of people. You're not really blaming anybody outside of yourself. So it's not like they're wrong.
But you do think it's the environment and not yourself.
And what you're not doing is you're not taking that moment to take a breath and just settle in before you jump in to make solutions. So you're jumping off balance. So if I'm a dancer, and if I'm off my center and I take a leap, I could sprain my ankle. So what we do in dancing is we get low, you take a plie, and then you move from there. So you're on your own center. And if you're off your own center, you're operating just a little bit off. So if the entire group is operating from this state of being just a little bit off, there you go. You've created that environment.
That's really good. So if I'm at work and I'm experiencing a great amount of stress, and I'm in the stress, so I'm in the noise and in the hyperventilation, I'm not grounded, I'm not centered, and I'm a receptor for all of that other mischief or noise or stress. Then I go home and I experience that stress even more, and then I take that with me. But if I notice myself, oh, wow, I'm really stressed out, I got to catch a breath, I got to take a break, I got to get on my center, then what you're saying is I have a better capability to have balance when dealing with all those other people.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And basically, the moment that you start acting from that state, you are creating that state with everybody else. And so
Good or bad?
Good or bad.
Okay,
so
good.
What we notice is when we come back into everything, all the solutions are right here with me. I have access to hundreds of humans who have my answers. Then we can step forward with peace of mind and find the answers. It's not us making the answers. We have the access to them. But we don't have the access when we're jumping ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is the journey to wholeness is at some level about a journey to presence.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And wholeness is presence.
So,
So wholeness gets you out of this state of thinking ahead of time, contemplating the past, all of that. The past, the present are here now. You can take a breath and move forward from right now.
good.
Yeah.
So when you were part of our Ignite Power program, we talked about the book, and we talked about that the book is a book that begins with the inner child. What is an inner child? Who is the inner child? And why would anybody want to waste their time
Yeah.
if they don't understand it?
Yeah.
Dealing with an inner child. Tell me about the inner child.
Thank you. So I'm calling this actually an inner child book for adults because it's dealing with when things fall apart and what happens when things fall apart. What happens frequently with most of us is, even if we've been in therapy for years, this part of ourselves that hasn't matured wants to take over, wants to manipulate, wants to control the situation, and thinks it's in charge. But that part is already seeing all the problems and is actually creating the problems in front of us because we're adding the stresses to it. We might be blaming people. We might be blaming there's not enough time, there's not enough money. We're not looking for the solutions. So that wholeness state looks for the solutions and lets go of what's not working, doesn't orient towards the failures, the missteps, what isn't there, what's not available, what would be the lack, the unavailability, and starts orienting towards how do we solve this problem? How do we get this done? And it's not pushing how do we get this done. It's not making it happen. It's knowing that there is a solution out there. So you're being more receptive to the solutions, and you're actually physically having to do less of what you don't want to do, and you're allowing people who have the skills to take care of those things.
So there's about 1,000 things that I'm thinking of right
Okay.
now. So in my own life, I have, when I have an issue, so something bad happens, whether it's there's rats in my hot tub, which is happening right now, which is pretty gross. But it could be something like last summer, I got COVID right before my son's wedding. And he was not very nice about it, actually. He was pretty nasty and disrespectful and blaming and shaming. And as soon as he was responding to me that way, I responded in a way to protect myself. And the moment I did not realize that that was my little kid, he doesn't love me, he doesn't like me, I'm a bad mom. And so I shut down. I literally shut down. I didn't yell or scream or defend myself. I just disappeared. And then I did something even worse. I shut him off of social media so I didn't have to see him or hear from him to protect myself.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that that was like a whole inner child experience until 3 months later when I did something called the Hoffman process. And in the Hoffman process, they have you look at all your patterns. Do you have victim patterns, which you talked about? Somebody's doing something to me. Or do I have martyr patterns, like, oh, I have to do all this work? Or do I have blaming patterns? You guys are terrible people, or you guys are jerks, or why is this happening? So all these patterns that we have, it seems like, and tell me if I'm right, they're remnants of the inner child that didn't grow up.
Yes.
So we matured, but we didn't mature in saying, how do I deal with rejection, stress, disappointment, upset, exhaustion, all of it.
Yeah. So all of that, yes, and that would be what I would call your wounded inner child.
Mm-hmm.
The beautiful thing also is, as adults, we need to play.
Yeah.
We need to go and recreate. We need to get out there and enjoy ourselves out in the world. And even in the office setting, when you have that lightness feeling, creativity starts flowing. New ways of doing something come up. We could also refer to that as the inner child. And so it's not that the inner child is bad. There's so much creativity that comes from that state of innocence, that state of possibility that we don't have when we are strategizing. We want to bring some of that creativity into our strategizing, And that's what I call our state of wholeness, when we allow all of those parts of ourselves to work together, and we find the skilled parts, and we notice the wounded parts, and we take time and we pause when that comes up versus react. So we step away from reacting. And that's why I did it as an inner child book. It's literally illustrated. It takes you into this state, like you can literally pretend like you're in a parent's arm, you're reparenting yourself. And looking at the art in it, we found a beautiful artist to illustrate the story. And then you're walking yourself in, and it goes deeper. It's not going into your conscious mind, it's going into your subconscious mind.
All right, so hold. You're so excited, which is awesome.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm literally reliving the last 3 days. I said we did a retreat. Well, the whole retreat is about having a team work as a high performance, innovative, healthy human system.
Yeah.
And I would say a third of the retreat is dealing with everything that's in our way. All of our resistance, all of our stress at work, all of the dysfunction. But then there's another third of the retreat. We do ropes, we do low ropes, high ropes. We give them games to play and brain teasers. And one of the people said in the debrief last night is it was so fun to play with my team. And so I did not know I was doing it, but it looks like I'm with people, leading them through growing up their wounded self or their reactive self at work, and then also tapping into, turning on and tuning into their play part, which creates innovation. It's like the mother of innovation. And they did come up with really good ideas of what they need to do to bring their organization forward. So given this is a work-liberated podcast, how does a person know that they need to, it might be time to tap in to that part of themselves that forgot how to play, that part of themselves that is reactive and always defending themselves at work and having a hard time maybe working with other people? How does somebody know, wow, I might want to pick up Serena's book, or I might want to explore this thing called inner child? What are some signs that it's time that the doorway might be open for this?
So thank you for that. It's going to be different for everybody. One of the biggest things that you're going to notice is either you're beating yourself up and you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself and taking on the world. That is a great time to realize maybe I need to give myself a little bit of break, a little space.
So if martyrdom, if you feel like a martyr, you feel like you're giving too much, doing too much, that might be one sign.
Yes. And this kind of goes along with martyrdom. Nobody's doing anything right. Everybody should be doing things different. Timing is off.
So hold on one second. Okay. So we call everybody's doing something wrong. We call that the villain.
Yeah.
Nobody's good enough. I can't trust anybody. These people are stupid. I need to work with smarter people. It's like just impatient. We heard a lot of that yesterday. Impatient. I'll just do it myself. I'm the smartest one in the room. They can't do it right. And there's people that actually go through work that way. Yeah. And they become very aggressive. So if you find yourself being super aggressive or super impatient, when else?
Another time is when you're just realizing that you're no longer engaged, that you've lost some of your own spark. Like, what have you lost inside of yourself? So just contemplating this story, I don't want to say that it cures everything, but it brings you back to you. We all need to come back to ourselves. And as adults, we've stopped that.
Good. So when you've lost the passion, you've lost, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, you've lost that love and feeling for yourself even, for your work, for what your craft is, or you're finding yourself just separate, disengaged from life, going through the motions. So we've got victim. Did we talk about victim? We talked about villain.
Yes.
We talked about martyr. Actually, we didn't talk about victim. We talked about martyr. We talked about villain. We talked about disengaged. Tell me about victim, because we had some victims in the room yesterday where
Well, we did talk about victim when everybody out there is
harming us and
doing it wrong, and then also harming us out to get us.
we have no power over, like we find ourselves powerless.
Yeah.
So those are some warning signs that you might want to do some inner work. And what I loved about the book is it's about a little girl that finds herself, and it's probably not perfect, it's my memory, but finds herself having conflicts with other people, like this person's this way, that person. So she finds herself being judgmental, but she doesn't know she's being judgmental.
Yeah.
She's just experiencing that person's mean, that person's this. And then she goes in and says, wait, I might be those things.
Yeah.
And then she picks up the pieces for all her fragments and experience like peace of mind, happiness, joy. And it's actually a delightful book and it's thin to read either for oneself or even if you have a child, to help that kid understand what might be going on with their emotions. So let's put this into what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, I want to add on to what you were just saying about that.
Yeah.
So that actually happens a little later in the book. She goes through several cycles of pausing and orienting towards her wholeness. So it's constantly coming back to how do I start being kind to myself? Because usually what's happening, if we're pointing anywhere else, we've definitely done some disconnecting from ourselves. So she starts reconnecting from herself. And at a certain point, she actually steps away from the whole journey. And that's part of it, is just realizing on the path, we're going to be on every different level of the path.
So let's look at the path right now. When we look outside of this studio that we're in and outside of our lives, this is a really tumultuous time in our country, in the world, in organizations. What's going on? I know that's a big question, but what in your opinion, you wrote the book to help people, what's going on and why do people need it now?
Yeah. Well, one thing I hear about this time right now is that it's scary. But another component I'm hearing is it's calling people to rise up. And we're polarizing more than we ever have. But we're also, I'm finding, in a lot of the circles around me, we're also coming together tighter than we've ever come together. We're having to trust in each other. We're having to find that. So this time is really testing us. Are we going to polarize, and are we going to just point fingers at all those people who are doing it, quote, wrong, who are different? We can have all the judgment words that we want to say on any side. Are we going to buy into that? Or are we going to step into finding solutions? Are we going to find ways to interact with each other that cultivate kindness, that add that charisma of inspiration for solutions that weren't seen when we were in that stuck tight spot?
Yeah, so it's like and again, because it's a work podcast, but like a team that is separating from each other, working in silos, that would be similar to polarization. Like, I don't agree with the way you do things, but then when the team comes together and says, no, we're one, we are one team, and then we can tap into the collective intelligence way beyond my wisdom, but my wisdom, your wisdom, her wisdom, his wisdom. And
with that, there's usually at least one or two strong values that everybody's going to hold.
Yeah.
And that is what would you be orienting within your wholeness. Because you take one value and it's going to start, like if you take kindness, you've got love in there, but then you've also got, it's very kind to be productive.
Yeah.
It's very kind to set clarity so people know what rules are happening.
Yeah.
So all those things end up feeding each other in those values.
Yeah, and so what we noticed in the deep alignment workshop is at the very end, when they came together and they sat in a circle. We start in a circle, we end in a circle. Not a tribal circle, but kind of. And everybody kind of says, I am complete when they're done. But what people said over and over again is they got to know each other at a deeper level. And some of these people have worked together for 10 years. And 8 years, and then there was a few new people who never felt connected because it's a remote work environment. And so they never felt connected. And one of the words that kept coming up yesterday was community. was synergy. It came up in the last 3 days probably 16 times. And on the 7 levels of effectiveness, the lowest level is hopelessness, despair, which is what people often feel when they're alone. They're solving problems alone, they're working alone, or even in a sea of people, they feel alone. And then synchronicity or synergy is what people feel when they come together and they accomplish something that they couldn't have accomplished. And when you talk about your journey to wholeness, I look at when people are under stress, when they are feeling desperate or lonely or frustrated or anxious, they're at the low level of effectiveness.
And I would call that fragmented.
Yes. And in our workshop, we call it Ignite Culture. We say that people are more fragmented and fragile than ever before. And as leaders, we need to understand that people are fragmented. So how do we bring them to courage and engagement and innovation and synchronicity? And it sounds like what you're saying, and many of our other guests, but you're saying it very differently. So keep saying it because it's working.
Thank you.
You're saying they have to connect with their inner self, or they get to.
Yeah.
And then when they're more connected inside, they can be connected outside.
Yeah. And with the book in particular, taking a step back from the task-orientedness of life and looking at beautiful images, taking that moment. Outside of that book, taking moments to get into nature. I know Madge is so good at this, is having that commitment to expanding our awareness with art, with nature, with those things that, yes, we're here to serve our purpose and our mission through work, but the rest of our life also feeds it. So our family feeds it. Our connection with nature and community, all of that is feeding into what you're creating at work.
So from a neuroscience perspective, there's 2 networks in our brain. There's a task positive network, and that's, I got to get this report done, or I have to do this podcast, or I have to send that email, or I have to clean the rats out of the hot tub. When the task network is high, what people might not know is the default network is low. It's like a teeter-totter or like a camera. And when the aperture of task is wide open, you can be very, very focused and very, very productive. But this aperture of default, which is connection to the self, connection to other, connection to community, walking in nature, experiencing the essence of life, creativity, it's very, very, very narrow. So our brains don't even have access. So what you're talking about is in the brain science part is we actually need to, for health, well-being, creativity, connection to other people, friendships, relationships, we need to tap into this.
And we need to tap into that also because when we're just in the task mode, at a certain point, we're going to get fatigued.
Yes.
And in that task mode, we're going to start going down in quality of completing those tasks. So we need to go back and forth. And if we don't allow ourselves, if we constantly are on that, we're going to start seeing our family suffering,
performance suffering.
All the performance suffering. So it's not just we need one or the other. It's that they feed each other, that we need the teeter-totter to move up and down.
Yeah, so I was I flew to Canada a week and a half ago, and I was a late flight. There was an issue at the airport. Accidentally, we checked a box that said I was experiencing COVID symptoms. So I was like an hour in that line, and then I barely made my flight. So by the time I got to the hotel, I was fatigued, but I couldn't fall asleep. So I'm laying in bed and the brain is spinning. 3 a.m. I fell asleep. I woke up at 7. So that's 4 hours of sleep. And best recommendations are we need 7.5 on average sleep every night. It was the worst presentation I ever gave. I got horrible feedback. I didn't connect to the audience. And the partner that was with me, God love her, I love her. And she's like, don't worry, you were great, you were great, you were great. I said, but they don't think I was great. So it doesn't matter what you think. So we relaxed. We didn't work harder. We relaxed, we collaborated, we actually changed the presentation, added a lot more pictures, took away a third of the content, threw it away, deleted it, and the next day went back and we took people on a very narrow journey to the self and how they show up as leader. But it was that nighttime activities and getting to bed early and nurturing myself. And it was a classic case of putting too much work in, and then the performance suffers. And none of us want our performance to suffer.
Yeah.
So this all-nighter thing that we learned in college, while it might have worked one time to take a test, it's not a way of living. And what I hear you saying is balance, even though you didn't say it. You said we need the teeter-totter, we need both sides of that teeter-totter.
Consistently.
We need to plan fun, play, ease, rest into our work activities. Yeah. And the other thing I'll say is when I coach clients specifically at the C-suite level, we'll tell them they need to put white space in their calendar, and they resist because they think white space means I'm not doing anything, which means I'm not being productive, which means I'm lazy. And what do you want to say about that?
Actually, I want to go back a moment.
Yep.
With what you were saying about pushing ourselves. There was this great interview of a man who did Ironman triathlons, and he did it in like record time, and they talked about like how amazing he was. And he was like, actually, I think the people who just ran that thing in 12 hours are the people who I'm in awe of, because the will that it takes to do that is insane. And him being able to do it in 4 hours, which seems insane to most of us, he's like, I'm programmed to do that. Like, I've put in the time outside of it, so I'm not wearing my body. My body is efficient. And when we give ourselves more of that open space time, we become more efficient at work. So we need to be doing the tasks regularly, but we also need to give ourselves the rest. Just like athletes need to really push their body, but they can't keep on pushing their body. They have to rest.
Yeah, they have that recovery period.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people refer to work-life balance, and I like work-life rhythm, so that you realize there's a downbeat, there's an upbeat, that you're constantly keeping that tempo. And in the corporate...
I like that too. I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
Serena, work-life rhythm.
Yeah, work-life. Because it's like, if you think of balance, that would mean you're stagnant. You're just staying on this one thing. You're never going up and down. And we were just talking about teeter-totter. It goes up and down, up and down.
Yeah, I really like the rhythm.
Yeah, so we want to take in those times, and that is part of our mission, is to create, and then we come forward with more charisma, more connection, more ease,
more passion,
more
energy.
And people enjoy being around us more, and we enjoy being around others more. So we want that.
So tell me what inspired you to write this book in the first place.
This is a funny story. So this actually came out of me about 20 years ago. And it happened when me and a friend were in a fight. We got in this fight, and then I left, and I chose not to engage in the fight anymore. And I went and wrote, and this story poured out of me. And from there, I looked at her, and I was just like, we're just two little kids. And I got that. And the other component was I'm highly dyslexic. So for me, editing is a big process. That was over 20 years ago. And I just last year realized, I think this is edited after over 20 years. And I talked to a friend, and she knew this amazing illustrator. And so I connected with Darren to illustrate it.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And if they want to get a copy of the book, where do they go?
So right now I am getting ready, and probably by the time this is posted, we will be doing a Kickstart campaign, and we'll have a link somewhere to get on my mailing list, and you get on that mailing list and you'll know all about the Kickstart campaign, or if the campaign is done by the time you listen to this, you will know where to buy the book as well.
We'll have a link on the end of the podcast.
Yeah, you
Good.
can just sign up.
And maybe we'll have a pop-up right now, here, right there, right by my hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were inspired because you had your own break in relationship.
Yeah.
And you had an insight, like a moment of clarity oh my gosh, we're just two little kids.
Yeah.
That's really great. That's wonderful. That's how the 3 principles started.
Oh.
Sid Banks was witnessing his wife and her mother bicker for like way too long. And he had an insight that it wasn't even them really bickering. It was like their lowest level of thinking that was doing that. And I'm also listening to Esther Hicks a lot, and she has these rampages about thinking and thinking about thinking and thinking about thinking and thinking about thinking. And it makes us crazy.
Yeah.
Unless our spirit's in a good place, our heart's in a good place, our head's in a good place, our thinking probably will not be in a good place.
And when those are all in a good place, when we feel in alignment with that, we're infectious. Like, people just want whatever we got going on, whatever that is. More people want to be in projects with us. More people want to be in whatever team we're in. We become that person versus that person.
Yeah. And we all have the capability of being both.
Yes.
At any time. And it is a choice, but it doesn't always feel like a choice. It doesn't always feel like a choice. Okay, there's rats in the hot tub, and my sister's coming to town, and I can actually be cool about it. Yeah. We don't really need to be in the hot tub. And the rats aren't in my bed. But we can choose. Like, we can choose our response. And it doesn't always feel like that. So let me ask you, because of what I just said, and then I have more questions. What are some hacks, like quick and easy ways to go from that reactivity, the reactivity, to responsiveness or peace of mind? And I know you have lots of them, but
the first one that came to mind is for anybody out here who's watched Byron Katie. She has the work. First question: is it true? When you have stuff up, usually we're making up a story that has some falsehoods in it. Can we move through those falsehoods? Can we find out something that's deeper in the truth of our story?
I'm upset about something. I'm upset with my boss, which typically happens. I'm upset with my boss. The boss said something or did something that pissed me off or rubbed me the wrong way, and I have a thought about that. So you're saying the first thing is it true? Is it true?
And you can, usually we mean the boss is a jerk, he's totally rude. So then you can think of 3 stories that go different than that. The boss had a hard day.
The boss is under a lot of stress.
Yes. Yeah. So we can start pivoting what we're thinking about that other person. And then if you turn it inward and you go, oh God, I really messed up, I really fucked up. Okay, how do I get compassionate with that? Sometimes that for me is a lot harder when I'm thinking I did bad and I'm internalizing it.
Yeah, good.
So instead of internalizing it, all of a sudden, how can I improve this? Oh, where does this shift happen?
So let's slow a little bit. So I think the boss is a jerk, which everybody does. I mean, even yesterday at the retreat, the first day people walked in, the boss kind of was being a little bit of a jerk. She's exhausted. She's got health issues. She's got issues with her child. She's got issues with her family. Her sister is sick. The company's struggling right now. So the boss has a lot of reasons to be moody or upset. But if I say the boss is a jerk, is it true? Most people will say, of course it's true.
Yeah.
So when you ask that question, is it true? How do you go deeper? I know she's got a script and it doesn't need to be perfect because she's not on the podcast, but is it true? How do I know if I'm making up and I believe it's true or if it's really true?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of hard to, we're going to choose that example.
Yeah, the boss is a jerk.
A jerk is subjective by its nature. So anything subjective doesn't necessarily land on truth because it depends on your perspective with it.
Good. That's actually really good. So first thing, is it true? And then do you know her second question?
Oh, sorry. I wish I did right now.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So questioning and going down the question cycle. I think she says, is it true? Is it real? Where does this show up inside me?
So flipping around. So pivoting is another important quality, and what you'll see in this story is little Emma, the main character, is constantly having to pivot her attention and her awareness.
So say more about that.
So pivoting, we demonstrated it earlier with this jerk boss. We pivoted from they're a jerk to they're holding a lot right now. I notice, like, if you get really mad at somebody and then you just find out they had a cancer diagnosis, all of a sudden, you're not going to be mad at them. You just like, oh my God, you just have a really hard time right now.
So here's Byron Katie. Question 1, is it true? Question 2, this is the key. Can you absolutely know it's true?
Yeah.
And if you're being honest, most of the time you can't.
And anything that's subjective can't be.
Yeah.
Even positive. Even if that person is amazing.
Yeah.
You subjectively cannot prove somebody's amazingness. They did some great things.
Yeah, and people say things, but you actually don't really know what they mean by that. You never really know what they mean by that unless you get curious. Yeah. So you just said that thing, and I took it this way. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
And we don't do that. You say something to me, and I say, she's a jerk. Yeah. And then I go off, and I actually replay what Serena said to me over and over and over again, which is not healthy. And I believe it to be true. And then I work myself up, and people quit jobs, by the way. The Great Resignation, a lot of people quit jobs over a misunderstanding. And then they take themselves to the next job, and same situation, different boss. Yeah. And then the next job. So back at the retreat, a couple people that were there, I was doing this whole skit, which I get very animated. And I said, my boss is a jerk. I'm going to quit and go find a better company. And then person goes to the better company, and pretty soon people over there are a jerk. Yeah. And pretty soon people over there are a jerk. And the question to ask is, what's the common denominator? And then everyone started laughing, especially a brand new person in the company who was like, oops. Oh my gosh, I'm reliving again and again and again my story.
Yeah. And I love what you said there earlier, is just that moment of getting curious. What stories am I making up here? A lot of times we don't even literally have the thought they're a jerk. We just have the reaction they are. And so then just seeing our own reaction, what am I reacting to?
So stop right there. When I have a reaction and I'm not even present to that I'm thinking, because this is real for people. Yeah. Very, very real. So how do I know I'm having a reaction? What are some signs that I am reacting to something? So people that are listening at home or in their car can say, oh my gosh, that means I'm reacting. So what are some signs, since you're very embodied? Yeah, so
starting with the embodied signs, we're holding our breath, we're tensing our muscles. So usually though, we don't even know we're tensing, we don't even know we're holding our breath, but we do know that we are pushing ourselves away from the situation. We are distancing ourselves in whatever way from what makes us feel uncomfortable. Or we're pushing our way in and trying to make it better. And both of those are tensions.
Yeah, so embodiment could be holding your breath.
Or disembodiment.
Clenching your jaw, your fists. It can be like a knot in your stomach. Yeah. It could be scowling. Sometimes, you scowl and you don't even know you're scowling. Yeah. And then another way is to either retract, remove yourself, or force. So all of those are reactions.
And then another one that we didn't mention yet is just freezing. And that one gets really scary in the work field because you sometimes can literally blank out. You can't access your thoughts.
So you become a deer in the headlights.
Yes.
Yep. Fight, flight, or freeze. So,
and actually they're adding a new one to that. They keep on adding to that.
Appease?
Appease is close to coddle.
Yeah.
So coddling is when you are over complimenting, you're really being super friendly, but people don't feel it because it ain't authentic.
Yeah, it's pattern. It's one of the patterns, a need for approval, constantly caretaking. Yeah. And are you okay? Are you okay?
Just that, just makes somebody's skin crawl when you're acting from that reaction.
Yeah, good. So back to Byron Katie. Is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true is the second question.
Yeah.
3, how do you react? What happens when you believe what you thought? So that's the part of stopping that you've talked about early on, checking in with ourselves. How do I know it's true, and how am I reacting? What's happening in my body? What's happening in my thoughts? So it's taking a minute to check in before being certain of whatever you're making up. And then the last question, thank you, Byron Katie, and thank you, Serena, for bringing it up. What would you be without, who would you be without that thought? So if I could let go of that thought, who could I be? Who would I be?
Oh my God, there's endless possibilities.
Yeah.
And all of these are basically steps on how to get curious.
Yeah.
And this story is pointing to how to be curious about why you shut down or why you open up. The moment you relax and get curious, possibilities start opening up. You start seeing them. If you get curious about how things aren't working, that's actually shutting yourself down. So I'm going to just reframe that. There are ways of getting curious where people start pointing and accusing. I wouldn't really call that curious.
Yeah.
Curious is looking at possibilities and how to make things work and how to collaborate and what are the possibilities. Then you're in that open state.
Yeah, so there's another piece of that. In the world of neuroscience, there's a guy who wrote a book called his name is Sean Anker, and the book is The Happiness Advantage, and it's really great for anybody who wants to be liberated at work to read. And it says that our brain will go to negativity. It's like a Velcro. We look for what's wrong. What did they say that was wrong? What did we say? What did they say that hurt me? Versus what's working about this situation? What can I appreciate? That person's really passionate. That person's really hurting, and they're emotive. And how can I connect to that? And so, from a brain science standpoint, we have been trained, most of us, to look for what's missing, to look for what's wrong. And if we could start to look for what's right, we'll be happier and we'll be more connected. So Serena, we've got about 5 more minutes. Mm-hmm. What are the main insights that you want people to get from the book, Journey to Wholeness?
To start with, the starting of the book is something awful is going to happen. There always is going to be something unwanted that will happen. We can't change that. So just accepting it.
So being accepting that we live in a world where shit happens. And some of the shit that happens we don't want. But when we resist it,
yeah,
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Yeah. So when something happens, turning our attention to our wholeness, which is getting curious.
Breathing.
Curious about how this unwanted thing is going to resolve itself versus resisting the unwanted thing. Constantly letting go of those walls that are trying to keep things in the status quo. The status quo no longer works. our computers upgrade every couple weeks, it seems like nowadays. Things are always shifting, and how do you stay with the shifts?
And it sounds like, from putting the period at the end of the sentence, if our computers are always upgrading, we need to upgrade our own computer, our own reactivity, our own ability to respond, so we can actually experience wholeness and have others experience wholeness in themselves. Yeah. And there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be stress, and there's going to be disappointment. Yeah. But who do you be in the face of it? Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any last words of wisdom in the next 3 minutes?
So with that, the component of compassion for ourselves, which is not grandizing ourselves, it's not I am the best person in the world, it's connecting to ourselves and what our experience is. Once we're connected to ourselves and we're kind to ourselves, we have that compassion, we can offer it to others, and then we can really become a team player from that state.
Yeah, and for many people, when they make a mistake or they fail to do something or they forget, the first place they go is shame. And that is a very old conversation. Yeah. And when any human being is in shame and in agony, the natural response from childhood is to point and push out there. And as Serena said, when we point out there, the other three fingers are pointing back to us.
Yeah. And I would say the last note
good.
is from that state of kindness and compassion, starting with ourselves and then starting to other people, we can put all the needs on the table and they can get met from that state of kindness, because it's inclusive. It's no longer pushing away and grandizing. It's now everybody has a place at the table. All the needs on the table can be met because everybody's looking for the solutions.
Yeah, so it's really good. So this is where we started and ended our deep alignment. It's all about agreements. So once things are not working, the boss is not happy, and I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not working. How can I be part of the solution? What do you need from me so that you don't have to feel stressed out? And most nobody says that.
Yeah.
Almost nobody says that to the boss. They expect the boss to just kind of do it. We saw that shift happen in the last 3 days with this team. In the beginning, she was the one who needed to fix the problems. In the end, they said, no, she's not the one who needs to fix the problems. We are being paid to fix those problems. And then they came to agreements. And then they all were part of the solution. And it sounds like whether it's business or whether it's home or it's friendship or relationship, when we're whole, when we feel whole and complete, we can be a complete part of the solution. So thank you so much.
Yeah, this was so fun.
Do you have a website that you want people to go to?
Yes, we'll hook that up.
JourneyToWholeness.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, it's just right now it is a landing page to get on the mailing list and get all the information. The emails don't come out too often, so you don't have to worry about getting bombarded. Once a week at the most.
Good. And we'll put it up on the thing. So thank you, Serena Fennell,
Yeah.
and Journey to Wholeness.